Hello everyone. So, I watched the first episode of Star Trek Picard Season 2, and I thought I'd talk about it a little bit. Um, okay. So, Star Trek Picard Season 1 was garbage. It was absolute and complete and total fucking garbage, from top to bottom. Um, Seeing some of the old characters come back, like Hugh and Seven of Nine. That was kind of cool. But they didn't really do anything good or useful or worthwhile with them. Um, and the show was modern Star Trek is the antithesis of Star Trek. If you've never seen old Star Trek and you only know this new shit, um, understand that what you're seeing, what you know to be Star Trek, is not fucking Star Trek. Um, Real Star Trek was against the use of violence for its own sake. Um, yes, you have occasionally an episode like you occasionally have an episode like Conspiracy, um, or you know one of the episodes in the original series where like the characters got tortured or something, for some stupid reason. On occasion, yes, but there was so much senseless violence in Star Trek Picard. Um, of all shows, you know, to be violent. TNG, Star Trek was always about finding um, intelligent solutions to problems, thinking our way out of something rather than fighting our way out of it. There was an episode with Captain Kirk. Everybody thinks that Kirk is like the guy who just blows people away and he's super violent and stuff. That's not the case. Um, there was an episode where they were fighting the Klingons and they got the upper hand, and this other character who was not a member of Starfleet, so that, she could say this. The reason she said it was to highlight, how much more evolved people have become in the time of Star Trek. She says, well, aren't you going to pursue them and finish them off? And Kirk is like, no, if I can um, uh, accomplish my mission, you know, by by turning tail and running, then I'll do that. It wasn't about revenge. In fact, it specifically went out and tried uh, to highlight how self-destructive revenge is as something, to be pursued. Um, and this new shit doesn't have any of that. It's so obvious that the people producing this crap have never watched Star Trek. They never bothered, you know. Yeah, there are references, but there are references that that these fucking people didn't come up with. They had some fucking intern or something watch the series and hey, it's your job to go and research and tell us about the Borg. Go read the Star Trek Encyclopedia or whatever. And so when they rewrote the character of Picard, he was unrecognizable. Yeah, he's played by the same guy, but he's not the same character that was in TNG. And that's the one that we all loved, you know. And we loved uh, Picard because he was more of a diplomat. He wasn't this hard-charging, a young stud. He was an older, seasoned, experienced captain. He was a mature adult. And this notion that kids won't be interested in or enjoy watching adult characters like that is bullshit. Complete and total fucking bullshit. I was 6 years old when The Next Generation started, and I watched it from 1987 to 1994. And all those years, I grew up with those characters and with lots of other adult characters on television. Sure, I would watch things like Tailspin and DuckTales and that kind of stuff, but they both appealed to me. And so, and this kind of brings me to my next point, to have a show like TNG that could be watched by young kids and enjoyed by them and could give them some positive life messages, to then take those characters, or the primary character of Picard, and twist him, to where one of his cohorts is beheading people needlessly. It's like it's a weird perversion, of that character, because old Picard, I mean, younger Picard, I should say, wouldn't have anything to do with a character like that, or he would try to get that character to understand how violence isn't a solution to your problems. We can find better solutions. That's what Star Trek was always about. And so they really just, and I was listening to an interview with one of the people, I think one of the producers and writers on the first season of Picard, and he was talking about one of the things they wanted to highlight was the violence, and it's like, this guy doesn't know jack shit about Star Trek. There are so many better writers, more talented writers, who do know Star Trek, that they could employ. But they won't, because those people won't vomit out whatever the fuck this shit is. They would try to make it better. And these assholes, they don't really want to make it better. I mean, they want to appeal to those baser instincts in people, the worst in people, which is why they write this shit like this. So, I didn't watch Deep Space Nine. I call it Deep Snore Nine because it was so incredibly boring. And then once they did the Dominion War, it was just like, okay, well, this is just war, and this doesn't interest me, I love space battles as much as anyone. I love starships, if you guys couldn't tell from watching my other videos. But space battles are like car chases. They're best when done quickly. If you have a movie and you want to put a car chase in it, you can put a 10-minute car chase in it. Now, I will say that the 40-minute car chase in the original Gone in 60 Seconds, I did enjoy it, okay, but that's a rarity, Even in something like Vanishing Point, the car chase was links in a chain, But I didn't watch Deep Space Nine when it originally aired. I went back and watched some episodes later on. But even that still had a degree of that Star Trek ethos. And occasionally they would do episodes like Far Beyond the Stars or something like that would have some kind of social commentary, which is another staple of Star Trek. Star Trek Picard Season 1 kind of tried to do a little bit of social commentary, but it's like, okay, well, the stuff that Trump and the U.S. government is doing, putting people in detention centers, people who come over the border, this is wrong. Well, yeah, it is. But at the same time, they have made androids slaves. Do you not see the similarities here? I mean, where's your social commentary on that? And, I mean, in TNG, real Star Trek, they made a point several times, and they also did in Voyager, about how creating a race of androids to use as slave labor was wrong. You're creating living things. These aren't just toasters. It's just, oh God. So after I saw Picard Season 1, I gave up on Star Trek, modern Star Trek. I tried to watch some Lower Decks. Nope, no fucking way, no fucking way. Again, the antithesis of Star Trek. It is god awful. Not only are characters swearing for no reason, just suddenly everybody in the Star Trek universe has a fucking filthy mouth. And yes, I realize that I did just swear, and I do swear in my videos, but that's different. I'm not a character in Star Trek. I'm this person. So, they're violent, they lie, they cheat, and it's like Gene Roddenberry, if he were buried here on Earth, he'd be fucking spinning in his grave. He'd be doing fucking warp speed at this point. Hopefully, if he did it fast enough, maybe we could launch him into space and he could go around the Earth in the opposite direction and he could spin it backwards, and turn time back to the point where Alex Kurtzman was never born. But anyway, that's a different reference from a different franchise. But I mean, I'm not one of these people who says that every piece of media that is made must be made for the entire family. I don't think that every network needs to be the Lifetime network, or whatever those other networks that are made for the family are. But I think that there are some things that I think we do need to have entertainment that is made for not only older members of the audience, but younger ones as well, like Star Trek. One of my greatest joys growing up was watching Star Trek. And the characters in that show had a sense of morality. Their morality stemmed in part from their sense of duty and their sense of honor and just their sense of right and wrong. And modern Star Trek is taking the tack that modern politicians are taking, which is that morality is just an opinion. Morality is just, it's flexible. Well, no, there is such a thing as an objective truth. There's the truth, and then there's everything else. And it just sickens me that, I don't have kids, and for a variety of reasons. In part because I could see the way the world was going, but if I did have kids, I wouldn't want them to watch modern Star Trek. I'd queue up some episodes of the original series and TNG and and Voyager and Enterprise, and I go, hey, check this out. Yeah, I wouldn't want them to watch this crap. They paid lip service to their to that morality in Picard season 1. You know, suddenly somehow we go from TNG, where everybody is pretty open-minded and progressive, to Picard, 25, 30 years later, where there are drug addicts. There's a version of Fox News in the Federation. I mean, again, I understand what they were trying to do, but the reason that we didn't see a lot of Earth in the original series in TNG is because the bad guys of today, the antagonists of today, in old Star Trek were represented by various alien races or alien threats. So that the integrity of the idea, that Starfleet, well, at the very least the Federation, is a more positive, progressive coalition of worlds could be intact. You can still have drama. You're just having drama with alien characters or human characters whom are out of date, or from some colony or this or that. It's not our characters espousing these horrible things. So when suddenly in Picard you have like a Fox News network, it doesn't make any sense. It undermines the integrity of what we know as the Federation. You could say that after the Dominion War, the Federation became more conservative, but why would you want to do that? Star Trek has always, it's supposed to be about hope. And when things here in the real world get difficult, Star Trek is there to be that kind of, to be uplifting. To give you some kind of hope, however false it may be, that things could get better, that we could, that prejudice and that kind of, all of that horrible shit will fall by the wayside. And so it's an actual, like, affront to not only Star Trek, its legacy, but also the fans when you undermine that. When I'm down, I'll watch TNG. Because part of the reason I like those characters is because they're compassionate people. They don't want to inflict pain on others. They're not interested in violence. They're not interested in prejudice. They hate it. They actively try to fight it. And that's what we need. We need that positivity in our media. But unfortunately, the media is reflecting the worst parts of our modern times. And unfortunately, Star Trek is also doing that when it shouldn't be. It should be the opposite. It's like making a dark Superman. No, that's not what the character, at this point, to the general population, people like me, it's not what the character's about. Even though the whole idea of the Superman character is just awful, if you really dig into it, but which I won't. But anyway, yeah. So I was done with Star Trek, modern Star Trek. But um, I had heard some things. I had seen some other videos made by some other YouTubers who watch Star Trek no matter how awful it is. Um, and I thought, okay, well, I'll watch the first episode of Season 2 of Picard. So I did. And I didn't want to projectile vomit after watching the episode like I did after watching the first episode of Season 1 of Picard. It I don't like any of the characters, any of the new characters in Picard. Um, they suffer from the same problems that all the other modern Star Trek characters suffer from, which is they use too many modern human colloquialisms. Um, they don't act, they act childish. Um, they're emotionally and mentally immature for characters in that Star Trek universe, especially when some of them have been, were in Starfleet. They lacked that maturity, and you need that when you're making characters. Someone had said, I think Gene Roddenberry had said this initially, and I think it was Doug Drexler who's often repeated this. Um, these characters, imagine these stories taking place on a United States Navy vessel. Now, think about all the stuff that you've seen in modern Star Trek from the Starfleet characters, and think about, a captain of a modern Navy ship. Imagine them acting like a childish, immature idiot when they've got this giant arsenal at their command, where they have all of these responsibilities of all of this crew, you know. Um, just that weight alone would necessitate more maturity than a lot of these characters exercise. Um, the prime example of that is Jean-Luc Picard himself. You know, um, one of Gene Roddenberry's things with the original series was the captain expressing the weight that he felt at being responsible for hundreds of people. And then on any given mission, perhaps being responsible for the lives on an entire planet, or a solar system, or a sector of space, or on and on and on, right? And how that weighed upon them. Pike talked about it, Kirk talked about it. That was kind of Roddenberry's thing at that time. Luckily, we didn't have to hear Picard, bitch about having to worry about 1,000, over 1,000 lives, because it's just like, hey, that's part of the job, you either do it or you're not captain, but yeah, so after the events of season 1, in season 2, we see Rios is now captain of like one of the most advanced starships in the fleet, which happens to be the Stargazer. And I'll talk about the ships at some point. 7 of 9 has taken over Rios' old ship. And she's doing stuff. I don't know what the fuck she's doing. She's just, I don't know. I didn't care enough to bother to pay attention. That annoying blonde woman is getting drunk. and unloading on Deltans. It was cool to see the Deltans again. I don't know why we haven't seen them since the motion picture. Um, I know that Troy was kind of was molded after Ilea to a degree. Um, and the novelization of The Wrath of Khan has Deltans in it, but they're wearing wigs because the characters in the movie have hair. Um, it was cool to see a bunch of bald people, you know, and they're Deltans. Oh, okay, I can appreciate that. But the drunk talk, I mean, consider this. Synthahol. In Star Trek The Next Generation, humanity had evolved to a point where on a spaceship, a starship, with all of those people, and with all of that responsibility between them, they no longer got drunk. Yes, Scotty got drunk in Relics, okay. He had to for the character, you know, in that particular episode. But generally, yeah, they just drank synthetic alcohol. So why is she getting drunk again, and how does that, you know, I mean, getting drunk on your own time, you know, in your quarters or whatever, I mean, that's one thing. But getting drunk when you're at a formal function, when you're a kind of dignitary, yeah, that's pretty immature. And all of these things point to the immaturity of the writers, you know. But there was so much like getting shit out of the way, you know. They had to wrap up all these little plot lines that they had established in season one and just kind of put them aside. Go, oh well, these characters are here now. So there was a lot of that hand waving going on. Which, whatever. I mean, I get the feeling that it's all for naught because, you know, they're going to drag these characters into being back to, you know, I'm afraid that they're going to drag them to, you know, back to being what they were. The one lady who was on drugs, she's gotten her shit together and she's now, I don't think she's the commander. I think she's commander in rank on the Excelsior. It's cool. Um, you know, apparently Starfleet is very forgiving. um, but in season 2, episode 1, we got some real Starfleet stuff, and although the idea of a guy in the 24th century when they drink synthahol, you know, sitting there with a cigar is just stupid. Um, why the cigar? Well, was he smoking it? I didn't see it lit that I can recall. So if it wasn't lit, you know, it's some kind of affectation. Seems kind of stupid. Really stupid actually, because of I mean, you know, we know the damage that smoking does, and by the 24th century, people are supposed to be smarter, you know, to where they're not voluntarily destroying their own bodies and you know, shortening their own lives. But whatever. Stupid Star Trek characters have to be stupid, I guess. So everybody's in a different place, which is good because the place they were in when we left them was pretty stupid. I mean, seeing Seven in a same-sex relationship. Okay, I made 2 videos about Picard season 1. One of them was everything I hated about it. Actually, not everything, just a bunch of what I hated about it, and the other one was what I liked about Picard season 1. So if you want to see what I liked about it, you can watch that. it's a pretty short video, as I recall. Not much to talk about. But, so there's some anomaly, and then a ship comes out of it. It's apparently Borg. Someone, they forcibly beam themselves onto the bridge of the Stargazer after saying that they'll only talk to Picard. We see a little bit of Picard's mom. We only saw Picard's mom once in TNG, and she was a figment. It was the first episode where we saw the Traveler, and she was dressed in, like, I don't know, some kind of 19th century garb, and talking about having tea and this kind of thing. There are hints of violence in Picard season 2, of course. Hints of violence, some kind of violence with Picard's mom. It's like, come on. They have no ideas beyond just violence. We don't need that. It seemed like they were trying to link Picard's mom and this Borg being that forced themselves onto the bridge of the Stargazer. But Picard was assimilated by the Borg, so they had and presumably retained all of his knowledge after absorbing it. So it's fully possible that whomever this Borg being is, presumably the Borg Queen, because she's going to be later on, we see her later on in the show, she was trying to bring about some memories or emotional reaction in Picard. But he basically, everything blows up. Picard, he's on the Stargazer, Rios' new command, and this Borg person beams onto the ship, takes it over because the new Stargazer was apparently built with knowledge or technology gleaned from the Borg cube that was being dismantled in the first season. And that made the ship vulnerable to a Borg attack. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, of course, you would want to make your ship as susceptible as possible to one of the most dangerous races ever known to exist in the universe. Yeah, seems like a bad idea. And somehow, through the Stargazer's computers, she had the codes, the access codes for all the other ships in the fleet. Okay. Also seems like kind of a bad idea. And then Picard orders self-destruct of the Stargazer, and everything blows up. And then Picard wakes up, he's at home, and things are kind of different. His Romulan servant / potential love interest is gone and has been replaced by a synthetic being, of course. And then Q shows up, and he's young at first, and then he does the thing, and he's older. Fine, you got to use that CG face at some point, so glad they got it out of the way quick. And we saw Guinan. Okay, cool. Alright. During all of season 1, I was like, why aren't they doing Q? Because Q specifically was a character that seemed to have a great deal of interest in Picard. And as Picard has gotten very old, and he was, in the first season, he was dying, it would make more sense to have Q be there. instead of coming up with all this bullshit about putting Picard's mind into some, you know, android that ages for some reason, it would make more sense to have Q involved and to have Picard reflect upon his life and reflect upon the changes in Starfleet and the Federation and that kind of thing. I mean, if you're going to take this dark turn with Star Trek, you need to justify it somehow. You know, you need reasons for it, and you need reasons for getting it back on track. You know, and so for me, you know, season 1 was a giant missed opportunity. I mean, it was pointless and meandering, and it didn't really accomplish anything. But at least they got Q, you know, back. Yeah, they're... It seems like they're trying to explore Picard finally, and how him being so closed off from other people, how that has affected him, you know, in his old age. And I think that's valid to a degree, although the character has already been kind of down this road before, in his various love interests. There weren't that many. You could count them all on one hand, between TNG and the movies. But especially Insurrection, you know, it seemed like maybe he had kind of taken a bit of a turn at that point and started to realize that he was getting older. You know, his family was dead. He didn't have any kids, you know, and in those movies he was kind of taking stock of his life and dealing with the aftermath of the choices he'd made. The choices being closing himself off from those around him. And we see that in the last episode of TNG, you know, All Good Things, where he finally, after 7 years, joins the card game and realizes, well, I should have done this a long time ago. You know, he's starting to let those barriers down. And Kirk had some of those same barriers with a lot of his crew, you know, but he'd still meet up with them outside of, you know, the ship, as we saw in Star Trek 3. So, but yeah, Picard being closed off, okay. I guess that's something that he always struggled with after that. You know, one thing that's been missing from all of this modern Star Trek is Star Trek itself and Starfleet. And one of the things that I think TNG got right more often than not was the ensemble. In TNG, you know, like in the original series, you would have like every episode was a Kirk, Spock, McCoy episode, you know. But by TNG, they realized that you needed to have all the other characters have their own stories. You know, you'd have a Worf episode or a Troy episode or Crusher, or you know, they'd all be peppered throughout the series. You know, when they weren't dealing with some kind of shared threat, you know, you could have an episode that dealt with these individual characters. But like in Discovery, most of those characters are wallpaper. You know, it's like we've regressed in that way. We've regressed in a lot of other ways. Which, I mean, I guess Star Trek has regressed as society has regressed. But, yeah, I mean, you don't have to do that. Why would you do that? I mean, there are so many blueprints for how to do a TV show right, and how to, I'm sorry, I'm sniffling, how to highlight other characters, you know, and integrate them into your plots. But, there's so little of real Star Trek boldly going, or going boldly, as is the proper term grammatically. Um, you know, oh, this season we have to deal with, you know, with this or with that or with this or with that. It's like part of the fun of original Star Trek, real Star Trek, good Star Trek, was you could have an episode, a different episode every week, a different type of episode. You know, one week we'd be dealing with the crew gets infected with some virus. Next week there's some anomaly. The week after that it's some you know, character story, or some social commentary, or time travel, or. That was the beauty of Star Trek, and that's one of the reasons it's lasted for so long, is the variety of storytelling. So many possibilities, literally infinite possibilities. Whatever you can imagine could happen. It's one of the beauties of science fiction. And science fiction historically has always been about social commentary, but not so much anymore. The social commentary has been wrung out of science fiction. But now it's like we have this overarching season-long threat, and so it's a threat. Okay? And so you're just slogging through the season, watching them. You know, I mean, it makes the modern characters look like fucking idiots, because the old crews could have dealt with this in an hour. You know, these assholes have fucking 10 hours and they can't do jack shit. But yeah, it's boring. You know, it's like the modern J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. They all have the same fucking plot. Bad guy wants to blow up the universe. Well, gee, we gotta go beat the bad guy. We gotta shoot at people, and can't solve the problem with our brains, you know, or with some kind of muscle. It's just about shooting at people, I guess. That shows the limited intellect of the writers, really. Lack of imagination and experience. I mean, that is the real difference between, I think, the old writers and more modern writers, you know. But anyway, yeah, and this season it seems like kind of the same thing. We're dealing with two different things here. We've got, they show us all the good stuff at the beginning, you know, real kind of Starfleet, you know, and it's like, hey, this is good, cool, we get to see this stuff. Maybe we get to see a little bit of modern, you know, 25th century Starfleet. Hey, right on. We get a fleet, an actual fleet with different spaceships. Not just the same ship with, you know, two different types of nacelles, you know. Which was cool. It was like, oh, good. You know, they show us that right at the beginning, and then everything else is going to be let down. But then we go from that to this fascistic version of Starfleet. And it's like, okay, you could do some social commentary with that. Parallel universe. Okay, fine. You know, alternate timeline. Okay. I'm on board with that. That's science fiction. Use that to your advantage, and highlight the problems of today using that device. You don't take the original Federation and Starfleet and twist them into something evil. You have some event that twists reality. know? That's how you do it. For realsies. And then we see Q's involved, and then they have to go back into the past, our modern day, basically 2024, just a couple of years from now. Now, here's the thing. Okay. In the original Star Trek universe, the early 21st century was definitely a nightmare. There was a nuclear holocaust at some point, and in DS9 they showed that it was like fascist, and you had the haves and the have-nots, and the space between those two was ever expanding. Gee, that sounds kind of familiar. Yeah, that's what's being highlighted today, and that's what young people are talking about today. What were they called? Sanctuary districts or something? I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen the DS9 episodes. I should go back and watch those. But Gabriel Bell, I remember that. But yeah, so if they have a clear message, you know, with their social commentary, great, because the first season, the social commentary in it got dropped pretty quickly, and its message was really muddled. If they've found a clear focus, awesome, right on, go for it. I don't know. I cannot judge an entire season based upon a first episode. I would say that this first episode, tonally, in terms of its presentation, it's 180 degrees from the entirety of the first season. So that alone would make me want to watch more. I just hope that they get their shit together, you know, and that they have a clear message if they're trying to present one, and that they leave the Star Trek universe better off than when they found it. You know? Like, don't make Star Trek a dystopian nightmare, because that's kind of what we're facing now. You know, we need the opposite of that. You can comment on that and about our modern day, but you have to leave that fabric of the Federation intact. There's a lot of ways you can do it. They did it plenty in old Star Trek. They did it in Deep Space Nine. There's 2 episodes, and one of them was called Paradise Lost. I can't remember the name of the first episode. But it was a good 2-parter, and it was very much the commentary in those episodes could be perfectly applied to today's problems. We've already been there, we've already done it, but you can still remind people about it, you know? Is the show going to be good? Who the fuck knows? I just hope that they don't spend the whole season in the past. But anyway, so those are my thoughts on Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 1, and some of my thoughts about Season 1. Hope you found this interesting. I will talk about the starships and what I thought about them later. Anyway, thank you for watching, everybody.